sweet melody unto Jesus. They are giving him praises forever.
So hello guys, what's up and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's me, your girl Barrister Neze, and this is Nezeville. It's been 1 year now since Nigerian gospel singer OSINACHI NWACHUKWU passed. It was the 8th of April 2022 when news of her untimely and unfortunate demise made it out. With a very heavy heart, a lot of people inquired as to the cause of this her untimely passing, and according to the narrative put out by her husband, she was said to have died of cancer. As soon as this information was put out by OSINACHI's husband, a can of worms came springing out open from every single corner. First was OSINACHI's mother. She recounted her ordeal and the ordeal that her late daughter had passed through in the hands of Peter Nwachukwu, OSINACHI's husband. She recounted that it took more than 8 years after OSINACHI got married before she could set her eyes on her daughter, as Peter had forbidden OSINACHI to have any relationship with any member of her own family. She said that when OSINACHI had her first child, Peter didn't tell the family, and Peter instructed her not to tell her family as well. She had to hear that her child had put to bed from neighbors and gossips around. She had to call Peter by herself and ask him, "Is it true that my daughter had given birth?" And Peter warned her very sternly not to step foot into their house. At this point, OSINACHI's mother had to call OSINACHI and asked her, "My daughter, is it true that you have put to bed and you didn't tell me to come and carry out my omugwo responsibility and rights?" OSINACHI then asked her mother if she had spoken to Peter, and she responded in the affirmative. She then asked, "What did Peter say?" And her mother said, "Peter asked me not to come." OSINACHI conceded and said, "Mommy, please don't come." There were several stories that her mother made public about how OSINACHI was living worse than a slave in her own husband's house. She concluded by asking the very pertinent question that if her daughter had indeed died of cancer, cancer is not hypertensive. It is not the cause of sudden death. Cancer is a process and it takes time. There are steps to it. Why didn't Peter inform the family that their daughter was ailing critically, terminally? Why did he wait until she died before he's now coming out to say that OSINACHI had cancer? OSINACHI's sisters, her twin sister and her older sister, also came out to give their own shocking accounts and experience of the kind of marriage that OSINACHI had with Peter Nwachukwu. They said that Peter would beat their sister mercilessly to a pulp at any slightest provocation. They recounted that Peter told them that if OSINACHI didn't leave his house alive, she was gonna leave dead. They said that Peter boasted, he took it as his own personal assignment, that he will sever the bond, the tie that OSINACHI shared with her own twin sister. It got so bad, the restriction got so bad that OSINACHI would see her sister, her twin, out at a concert or in a church event, and OSINACHI would pass her twin sister without even saying hi, because her husband had forbidden her to say a word to any member of her family. It was that bad. According to them, Peter Nwachukwu was in full control of OSINACHI's finances. He took all the bookings, all the payments for all her shows and events came into his account. He had no job. He was being sustained by her earnings, and yet made sure that OSINACHI didn't get any money from the monies that she worked hard for. When OSINACHI had concerts and flights are booked for OSINACHI, he will confiscate the flight money and put her in a night bus for her to attend the concert, regardless of how far the venue was. He would deny her the right to stay in a decent hotel and insist that she squats somewhere. They said that he was completely responsible for the brands and the events that OSINACHI participated in, and if he doesn't endorse or ratify it, OSINACHI had no right to handle that endorsement. She will turn it down. Now, this is the account of her sisters. But it didn't stop at family, because if it stopped at family, one would easily be tempted to imagine that sure, OSINACHI's family would always take sides with her. Other people, countless other people, gave their account of what they experienced between OSINACHI and her husband, Peter Nwachukwu. And one of such people is another music artist, her colleague, Frank Edwards. Now, according to Frank Edwards, he had witnessed OSINACHI's husband land her a very dirty and resounding slap there in the studio, to the full glare and shock of everybody present. What was her offense? She wanted to take a verse of her song in Igbo, but Peter Nwachukwu wanted her to sing it in English. And when she attempted to sing it in Igbo, he stood up and beat her up there at the studio. He also mentioned that the former NDDC chairman, Joy Nunue, so touched by the melodious voice of OSINACHI, built her a studio, a well-furnished studio, fully equipped, and just handed the keys over to OSINACHI to take possession of that studio. But just because Peter Nwachukwu's consent was not sought before that move was made, he told her not to accept the gift, and OSINACHI had to decline the studio gift even when she needed it so much for the progression of her career and craft. Her friends were not left out in the testimonies of what OSINACHI went through, allegedly, in the hands of her husband. A friend of hers named Chidima Izogo also narrated very bitterly her own first-hand experience of what she saw and what OSINACHI told her. She said that in the middle of a certain night, when they were driving back home from one of the church's events, just because OSINACHI had pleaded with her husband to take it easy with the speed he was driving at, he stopped her in the middle of the road and kicked her out of her car, and she had to trek back home in the middle of the night and was even attacked by these bad boys who tried to rob her. She said that Peter Nwachukwu would kick OSINACHI out of the house, a house that she paid the rent. He would kick her out at will for whatever offense, even if it wasn't her fault, and she will have to sleep outside in the harsh and blistering cold with no blankets, no wrappers, no covering to even shield her from the harsh weather. OSINACHI will sleep on the streets, and Peter Nwachukwu will lock her out. What was even more terrifying was when Chidima gave account of how Peter Nwachukwu tied OSINACHI down and ordered her own children to whip the living daylight out of OSINACHI. Just imagine that. And that story was also corroborated by OSINACHI's children themselves, that their father tied their mother and made them to flog their mother, and they had to cry and flog their mother on the order of their father. They didn't stop there. They gave very detailed accounts of all the tears, all the pain, and all the suffering that their mother went through in the hands of their father. So it was very difficult for people not to be taken by these testimonies, because they were all similar. They all pointed to one fact. They all corroborated each other. There was no contradiction or ambiguity. Every single testimony, every single account, every single detail, every single experience pointed to the fact that OSINACHI suffered both physical, emotional, financial, and psychological abuse and trauma in the hands of her husband, Peter Nwachukwu. Her family insisted very strongly that OSINACHI didn't die of any cancer at all, let alone throat cancer, but she died from domestic violence and the complications from all the assaults that Peter Nwachukwu had meted on her through the years. When all these discoveries were made, when all these accounts were made public, it sparked widespread outrage from the public. People were so shocked, so livid, so upset, so bitter, and they called for justice for OSINACHI. It became a movement. Justice for OSINACHI Nwachukwu. At this point, the Nigerian government, through the Ministry of Women Affairs, took on the case. Peter Nwachukwu was then apprehended and charged to court on a 23-count charge bordering on domestic violence and culpable homicide. He was to be remanded at the Kuje Correctional Facility and attend his trial from there. So the trial began May last year, 2022, and it commenced just as every criminal trial with the arraignment. Peter Nwachukwu was arraigned. All 23 count charges were read to him in a language he understood, and he took his plea. He pleaded not guilty to every single count. In other words, he insisted that he was completely innocent of all the accusations and all the evidence levied against him.
I not get the whole world because I've suffered a lot. Please. I've suffered. I abandoned. What killed my wife is lungs, cancer of the lungs, not killing my wife. I didn't kill my wife. Cancer of the lungs is what killed my wife. OSINACHI NWACHUKWU. So I'm suffering for what I didn't pass through. What I don't know.
After taking his plea and after the trial began, something really unexpected happened. One of Nigeria's biggest jailbreaks took place. On the 5th of July 2022, a coordinated attack on Kuje prisons where Peter Nwachukwu was detained took place. The attack saw 5 people dead and almost 900 inmates released back to society. When news of this jailbreak made it out, a lot of people were quite worried that Peter Nwachukwu had escaped. In fact, many blogs carried the rumor that Peter Nwachukwu was amongst the inmates that had escaped from Kuje prisons. And as though to confirm this rumor, nothing much was heard about the trial of Peter and the OSINACHI case anymore. But today, I will be bringing us with a number of updates that has happened since the Kuje prison break. One of the major updates that I would like to bring to your notice is that contrary to popular opinion, popular belief, and widespread rumor that Peter escaped when the jail was broken into, no, Peter did not escape. Why he didn't escape is still unconfirmed. Whether it's because he didn't get the opportunity to, or maybe because he did and didn't want to run, that is still unconfirmed. But the fact remains that Peter is still held at Kuje prisons and he has been attending his trial from jail. So another big update is that the full autopsy results, not all the speculation that were being made last year, autopsy has been carried out. The results have been made public, stamped by the National Hospital in Abuja, and has been presented and tendered in courts. This is exactly what the autopsy report says. The report saw no mark of violence on the deceased and listed the cause of her death to include generalized organ pallor, bilateral leg swelling, fluid in the sac containing the heart, tumor deposits in and on the heart, lungs, and kidneys, massively enlarged heart, and fluid around the lungs with restricted breathing. Now, despite this autopsy report said that there were no physical marks on her, but what do you think about these causes of death? Do you think that despite there were no marks, there had been some internal damage already done to OSINACHI from years of physical abuse? Do let us know what you think about these autopsy reports and the details that has now been tendered in court. So after Peter Nwachukwu took his plea, the prosecution opened their case. The prosecution are the ones that drag the accused person to court, and it's usually the government. Yes, a crime is a wrong against the government. That is why if you, for example, kidnap somebody, it is not within that kidnapped person's prerogative to determine whether he or she wants to charge the case to court. A crime is a wrong against the government, against the state. That is why in criminal cases, you will see the case being stated as the state versus Okonkwo, the state versus Bibiana, the state versus Barbara. So the case is usually taken to court by the state, by the government, through the office of the Attorney General of the Federation. So the Attorney General of the Federation is the prosecutor. They are the ones that took Peter Nwachukwu to court, and Peter Nwachukwu is the accused or the defendant. That is the terminology. So the prosecution called 17 witnesses, a whole 17 witnesses, to give their different accounts and different testimonies about what they witnessed between Peter Nwachukwu and OSINACHI, and all their testimonies, all their evidences, all their accounts pointed to the same thing, the same abuse, the same trauma, the same torture, the same domestic violence. They were overwhelming. Amongst the 17 witnesses, we had several members of her family, we had church members, we had her colleagues, we had a hairdresser, we even had her tailor come out to give her own experience about what they saw with Peter Nwachukwu. In fact, let me just read this little testimony that her tailor got to say in court. Grace Nnaji, who doubles as OSINACHI's neighbor and tailor, told the court that she met the singer when her husband approached her to make a dress for her. Nnaji, while giving her testimony, said that she became close to the deceased as her estate was very close to her shop. She said the first time in 2012, when Peter Nwachukwu brought OSINACHI to her for measurements, when they got in, he said, "Idiot, come out for your measurements." What hate? I mean, how can a man hate his wife so much? And worse is, despite the hate, he still refused to let her go. Let's go on with Nnaji's testimony. Nnaji said that she was shocked that it was his wife that he referred to as an idiot. She added that the deceased OSINACHI confided in her that Peter Nwachukwu was always hitting her at the slightest provocation. Ekweme, as I used to call her, came to my shop one day with injuries on her daughter's head, and she told me that Peter Nwachukwu pushed her and the child into a wall. The daughter had fever at the same time, and I was the one that gave Ekweme money to buy drugs from the pharmacy to give her own child. Like, Peter so confiscated her money that she didn't even have any loose cash to buy medication from the pharmacy for her own child, let alone take the child to the hospital. Another time was when she came and showed me the injuries on her back and told me that Peter kicked her at the back with his leg and she slammed into a wall with her chest. She fell to the floor and remained there crying until she slept off. She further said that the defendant, Peter Nwachukwu, was in the habit of locking his wife out whenever she went to church, and she would be at the gates knocking and knocking for hours on end. She said that at times it would take the intervention of neighbors before she would be allowed into the house, and that she slept at her own house, the tailor's house, for 2 days on one of the occasions because he refused to allow her into the house. She also testified that on one occasion, he left her in church after a vigil night, and while she was trying to find her way home, she was attacked by hoodlums who disposed her of her phone and bag. When Ekweme got home and told him of the incident, he said, "You are lucky you were not killed, as that would have been the best thing that could have happened to you." The tailor equally said that the defendant, Peter Nwachukwu, threatened that he was going to destroy the deceased's reputation, kill her brother, and that was the reason why she was afraid to tell anyone about her ordeal. She concluded by saying that when she told the singer to report the abuse to the police, her family, the church, and also human rights, she refused. Not only did she refuse reporting, she also begged her tailor never to report it and never to mention it to anybody. In fact, several other former employees and colleagues of OSINACHI were also in court to testify. I applaud that, because in Nigeria, a lot of people are very reluctant to testify in court. You know, we don't have this witness protection, and there are no protection for witnesses in Nigeria, basically, unlike the way it is abroad. So a lot of eyewitnesses are always very reluctant to come to court to testify. But you can imagine how bitter people feel, like they are risking themselves, risking their lives, coming to court to testify. I bet they couldn't keep that on their conscience to keep this truth away from justice's cause. Even OSINACHI's late children also testified against their father in court. You can imagine how sorrowful, how heartbreaking it is for children who lost their mother to the cold hands of death to come and testify against their father in a trial that can even lead to his own death. What trauma. This is a very big lesson to women that say they are staying because of their children. This is the results. How much benefits do the children have to gain in all of this now? So after the court heard the prosecution's case and the prosecution finally closed their case, it became time for the defense to open up their own case. Now, I'm taking my time to make this explanation because I believe that it is very important for us all to appreciate the steps in a criminal trial, to know how far this case has gone and to know what is left before verdict is given. I cannot assume that you all know these steps, and I cannot leave you with the thought or the ignorance that this case has been swept under the carpet. No, it has not. So in the interest of the listeners, let me give a quick breakdown of the steps of a criminal trial so we can know where OSINACHI's case is presently at. After an arrest and the police investigation, and it is clear that a crime has been committed, the case is charged to court, right? The first step in a criminal trial is the arraignment, where the suspect is docked. He is put in the dock, a box in the court, where the counts, the charges are read to him or her in a language that they understand. After that arraignment, after the charges are read, then the next thing is the plea taken. So the accused person will take a plea, and a plea means a formal answer to all the charges, and this answer must be either guilty or not guilty. So Peter Nwachukwu has been arraigned, he has taken his plea, and he has pleaded not guilty to all 23 counts against him. So after this, we have the prosecution open their case. Don't forget that he who alleges must prove. If you are alleging something, it is your responsibility to prove what you're alleging, not the defendant's responsibility to refute your claim. No, the defendant is not charged with the responsibility to dismiss your claim. It is the prosecution who is alleging that will open up the case to bring forward its proof and evidence. So all criminal cases and all criminal trials always start with the prosecution going first. So the Attorney General of the Federation, who is the prosecution in this case, has opened his case, and that was when it called all 17 of these witnesses to give account of their testimonies of Peter being a violent person against OSINACHI. And when the prosecution is done presenting its case, then it closes its case, and then the defense can come forward to state their own case. And the defense in this case is OSINACHI's husband, Peter Nwachukwu, and his lawyers. So we have come to the point where the prosecution is done and it is now the defense. Now, the defense has two options. The defense can either go ahead to defend itself against what the prosecution has alleged, or they can go for what is called the no case submission. Now, the no case submission is not a defense. The plea for no case submission is a request by the defense to fling out, to throw out the whole criminal charge, saying that from the evidences of the prosecution, from the allegation of the prosecution, it does not have any reason or right. The criminal charges are lacking in merit. There is nothing substantial to convict the accused person, like he is innocent. The prosecution are talking gibberish, and that the accused person should be discharged and acquitted and made to go home. Now, those are the two things that can happen. The defense counsel defending the defendant, or the defense counsel putting up a no case submission. And in this case, very surprisingly, Peter Nwachukwu and his lawyers tendered a no case submission, saying that there is no case against him, that all of these evidences are nonsense, that the autopsy does not support the allegation of domestic violence, and that the court should release him. So that's the no case submission. So the court will hear this no case submission, and if it truly feels that there is no case against this accused person, it will strike off the case and discharge Peter Nwachukwu. But if it feels that there is a case, it will strike off the no case petition and order for the trial to go on. And then the next step will be for the defense to open up its own case, call its own witnesses, which of course will be cross-examined by the prosecution and re-examined by them. And after the defense is done with its own case, it will close its defense. Then there will be the final address by the two of them, something like a summary, a written address. Okay, the prosecution would round up its case with a final address, and the defense will round up its case with a final address. And the next thing will be judgment. After judgment, then sentencing. There are two different things. Judgment is a pronunciation of guilt or innocence. The judge can say, okay, this person is not guilty, or this person is guilty. That is judgment. Then sentencing is the punishment that comes after judgment. So when judgment is, for example, not guilty, the verdict would be discharged and acquitted. But if the judgment is guilty, then the sentencing can be, okay, you are hereby imprisoned to 14 years imprisonment, or the death penalty, or this and that. That is the sentencing. So these are the steps. I hope you understand. If you do, please drop in the comment section so I can know that you understand what I'm saying. I'm trying to break it in very simple terms so everybody can be carried along. So you see where we are now on this case. For those who have been asking me, DMing me, mailing me, dropping in the comment section, where are we on OSINACHI's case? Has it been swept under the carpet? Has it been forgotten? No, it hasn't. We are on the case, and the court has adjourned the case to the 26th of September, where they would hear this no case submission, this no case application by the defense, and determine whether there is indeed no case against Peter Nwachukwu, or if there is in fact enough evidence against him. They will strike off the no case submission and the trial will go on. So keep being hopeful that justice will be served. I am also hopeful. We are all hopeful. The case is ongoing, and from my experience, when it has gotten to this stage, it's almost getting to half of the trial, and all things being equal, give or take next year, that is my own prediction, which I believe may be accurate. Give or take next year, I believe we should have judgment and sentencing. And be sure that I will keep monitoring that case. I'm very interested in that case. I will keep monitoring that case and bringing you major details as they unfold. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for joining me on today's very educative and informative video. Don't forget to share it on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, every platform where you think that people will benefit from the mass of this knowledge. If you're new here, or if you've been watching me without subscribing, don't forget to hit the subscribe icon, turn on your bell notification, give this video a big thumbs up, drop all your comments and feedback down in the comment section, and stay glued because we have so much more coming your way. It's me, your girl, Barrister Neze, and this is Nezeville. I'll see you guys in my next one. For now, bye.
Right now, while the saints are still around.